Hello everyone, this is Jack Sweet. Welcome. We're here to review the x56 HOTAS, that's hands-on throttle and stick, by Logitech. I have been playing with this thing for about a year and a half now. I have been very excited with its performance and used it for a wide variety of different things. Now, to cover what comes on board this thing, it is 189 plus programmable controls, 13 axes, 5 hats, 31 programmable buttons, RGB lights. It has 3 modes which can diversify your buttons and commands. It comes with software, and it has 2 USB ports, or rather requires 2 USB ports. Now when I say that thing, unlike its predecessors, this is 2 bases, one is a throttle, one is a stick, as you can see, and they plug in separately to different USB ports. Predecessors to this model have had to connect to each other. In my opinion, that's an upgrade because each one gets its own power and each one can be connected independently. So that's a great thing. Now I want to take a deeper dive into both of these items, and we're going to start with the first one in the name, which is going to be the throttle. Now this is a true twin engine control system, and it has a lock, which means that single axis can be 2 or 2 axes working as 1, and that can allow you to have singular or individual engine control, which is very useful. Starting from the left of the throttle, we have a rotary encoder which clicks up and down. That's in the form of a silver wheel. We have an up-down switch and 2 momentary push buttons along the back side of the throttle. Moving over to the right, we have an actuator which is 0 to 100 with a 50% detent and a push button on top. There is another actuator below that, which is another knob that has a 50% detent and a push button on it. Moving on to the silver on-off switch on the front of the throttle, that can be used to hold a button down. 2 hat switches just below that, another momentary push, and a mini stick that has a press feature as well. On the top right panel, you have 4 two-way switches staggered as they come down the right side. That goes to the next panel, which has 2 actuators, 0 to 100 axes with no detent and no press feature. However, they are still highly useful as knobs. And then you have 3 more toggle switches. These all have up-down features, just like all of the other metal toggle switches that you see on this throttle. So each one is effectively 2 different button pushes. Then you have the M1, M2, and S1 mode features that are available for you to change the functionality and presses of each of these buttons. And that takes you up to the tensioner, which is not an electric button, but it changes the tension of the actual axis in the throttle, which might be useful for a more tight or more quickly movable option based on preference and game. It's nice to have the ability to kind of customize that to whatever your play style is and whatever you're playing. Moving on to the deep dive of the stick, that's the S in HOTAS, I want to tell you a little bit more about this thing. Now it has 3 hats on the top of the grip, 1 momentary push button on the right side, and 1 momentary push button on the actual true top of the stick there, right next to the top hat. Now none of these hats have a press feature, so they are all 4-way hats, to my knowledge. There is a single stage trigger that breaks pretty quickly. There is a mini stick on the right side that also has a click feature. There is a momentary push button down there for your pinky by the hand rest, which is not adjustable. And then there is that brake lever there, which has a click and brakes relatively quickly. This is all over the grip, which is on the base. That is a plastic cup and gimbal system. and it returns to 0 utilizing a large spring that comes from the bottom of the grip and goes down to a plate which sits on top of the gimbal. And that's how the tension system of this works. A few tensioning springs are provided for tighter and more free or loose utilization of the joystick. However, I have always used the tightest one with the understanding that it is not very, very tight, but it is tight enough to keep the stick from moving left and right, forward and back. Now I want to talk about some of the pros of the x56 system. It has a twin engine control, which is an upgrade over its predecessors in terms of functionality. It has many switches, buttons, toggles, and the grip has a twist feature, so you should be able to bind all of your flight movement plus additional accesses into whatever you're playing, be that a flight sim, War Thunder, Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, etc. The mini sticks are really awesome and helpful. They are a favorite of mine on the HOTAS system. It is very easy to program. There are two sides to that coin. It genuinely looks cool. It is a cool looking platform, again in reference to its predecessors, much cooler looking than they used to be. It's available at a good price point at most places, be that online or in stores like Micro Center. And there's something to be said for that, because being able to get it, and if you have to get it again for whatever reason, it's there, that's good. Now let's talk about some of the cons. One that comes to mind on the grip, the stick on the right side, is non-adjustable for the hand rest, right? And so I once heard a friend of mine on YouTube say that in order to use the x56 you must have the hands of a Yeti. Whereas it's a funny joke, the reality exists that if you keep your hand near the bottom of the grip, you're only accessing the trigger, that brake lever, the momentary push button, and your bottom hat's there. You have to physically move your hand upward in order to touch the entire upper half of the grip, whereas that may not be a huge deal in more peaceful and relaxing flight sessions. It does become something of a challenge when you're talking about PvP or a very potentially stressful or exciting flight engagement there. Another one that I would mention is the LED quality. This may not happen on every stick, but as you'll see throughout this video and on mine particularly, unfortunately the LEDs in the stick section of the HOTAS started to kind of fail, and that resulted in them being off most of the time or flickering. In reference to the build quality, I have had a few members of my Discord community try out this stick, and some of them have quirks, right? Like one that was received by a friend of mine would bounce back and forth between 99 and 100% on the throttle axis. For me, one of my rotary knobs bounces in a very similar manner, and that's something to think about. So sometimes you may get one that simply needs to be returned and exchanged. Mine I haven't had a lot of problems with outside of the LED issue. The rotary knob is not a huge issue as it's not a primary function. Another one that I might mention is that buttons do fail on this system. In a year and a half of play, I have had one button, the switch that is on-off on the front of the throttle, the silver switch there that clicks and holds on, kind of started to feel a little bit almost gritty, as if it was dragging or grinding inside. The push button on the back side of the throttle for me has failed and will now only press maybe 10% of the time. But as far as button failure goes, that's 2 for me, and that's all I have. Everything else still functions perfectly. And you can see these sticks have not been through a lot of abuse. They've been treated very kindly, kept clean, free of dust, and any protrusions. They've not been hit or struck by anything, and they don't get slammed in normal play. For me, I also had to have additional power for these sticks. And what that meant for me is I got an internal on motherboard USB hub that has its own power supplied to it from the PSU. However, you could use any powered USB hub, and many people do that because if you get out there and looking on the forums for these things, if these things do not get enough power from their plugins, then you'll experience what's called ghost inputs. So if you'll push a button, it'll push many times, or maybe a button you're not even pushing will press frequently. So if they, for whatever reason, don't have enough power, then you'll experience some weird and freaky things with the LEDs and ghost inputs. So I have found that I needed to provide additional power, as many other people have with these through powered USB hubs. And I think we mentioned in pros as well that they're fairly easy to program. That's a double-sided sword as well, because there is limited program customization in that regard. The program is very dated, and actually changing functions from buttons to things like key presses is difficult and sometimes impossible. Maybe it's just the way that I was running it. It's just not a very intuitive program compared to some other joystick programs that I have seen out there. Calibration, which is normally a very easy process, is outright not included in some of the Logitech softwares, and you have to download more modern ones and able to do that outside of Windows basic features. So those are some cons for the system. And though they exist, it does not make it a platform that is impossible to use. Like I said, I played on this thing for about a year and a half, and it was a great time. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch the entire review. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Tell us your thoughts about the X56 or the X52 for that matter in the comments below. Is this your absolute favorite HOTAS? Is there a better one out there that I should be trying? I need to know about it. And if you'd ever like to hang out with us, please join our Discord at discord.com/SW33T. My friends, I will see you in the skies.